Have you ever thought of buying a franchise or currently own one or many? If so, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Franchise Euphoria, the podcast created and hosted by franchise attorney Josh Brown for the sole purpose of helping people find success through franchising.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. Today I am thrilled to have Brad Spencer on the show. Brad is Executive Director of the Brilliance Network, which helps small to medium-sized businesses scale and grow. And today we're going to talk about some specific things that small business owners can do to scale and grow. Additionally, we are going to touch upon Brad's past experience in owning, growing, and selling a restaurant, and some of his other business ventures, including his interest in franchising. Hello, Brad, and welcome to the show.
Hey, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, you know, I first learned of you through your interview on John Lee Dumas's Entrepreneur on Fire podcast, and really at that point, knew I had to have you on my show. Not only are you enthusiastic and driven, which people will soon see, but you are a big believer in the franchise model when done right and have some real-world experiences in helping small business owners scale and grow. And I can't wait to dive into all that. But before we do, take a couple minutes to tell us a little bit more about you and your business experiences.
All right. So, well, I have an interesting story because I've wanted to be a business owner for most of my life, and I didn't really know it at the time because I didn't know what an entrepreneur was growing up. I just was a nerd and studied business biographies and memorizing the globe and all sorts of stuff to understand the world, and I've done that since I was a little kid. So fast forward a few years, I get out of high school in 2004, graduate, and was going to go to Indiana University to study international business. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to see the world and travel, and kind of fell through. Last-minute financing glitches, wasn't able to go, so I stayed around at a branch campus and started studying marketing and business, and this is, fall of 04, spring of 05, so it's many years ago. So the internet has changed a ton since then, but I could see the power of that channel as far as reducing the cost of getting involved in business to basically nothing. And it's even more awesome now, 10 years later, there's so many more things like Facebook and other channels. But at the time, none of that really existed. I remember being one of the first 100,000 Facebook accounts back when it was still for college kids. It doesn't look anything or act anything like it does now. And long story short, I started studying marketing and business quite a bit from an academic perspective because I transferred to Penn State University and worked in the business library. So I got exposed to a lot of stuff because a lot of high-level business things, economics to marketing to supply chain and logistics to all sorts of things that were big thinking, brainiac type stuff in the business school because I was a reference assistant, so I helped PhD students and master's students with their dissertations. And so, I studied business from that perspective. And then when I graduated, I graduated with a finance degree with a track in real estate because they canceled the entrepreneurship program. So that was the next most interesting thing that I could find was real estate finance. And because business and real estate are so closely tied together, easy way to transition in and out of both of those fields. And so this is the late spring, early summer of 2008, and our good old economy decided to crap the bed, so to speak. Pardon my language there, but Lehman Brothers collapsed, and all of a sudden, my track in studying mortgage-backed securities and things of that nature that I was going to go into because that was one of the more interesting finance fields. And if you can understand finance, most of the time the rest of the business stuff falls into place. And that's kind of what I surmised from my professors and different experiences that I had during college. So anyways, the last semester of my college, I fell in love with Disney, and this was really the first exposure to scaling and growing that I'd ever seen, like in real life. Like I read about stuff. I read about all of UPS's logistics networks and how they could, I took a class in college that we went over how UPS shipped anything to anywhere in the world within 24 hours and how they did it. So all these different flow charts and really high-level proprietary information that, our professor, who was a logistics vice president for UPS, was able to teach us since they donated the information. So long story short, I started working for Disney now, and at Disney World here in Orlando, Florida. So I gave up my finance career to take a $7 an hour job at Disney because I was going to be the CEO of that company. That's what I wanted. I fell in love with the business. I fell in love with everything about it. And you've never seen so many people work so hard to touch every single visible detail. If you ever, if you're listening to this and you ever go to Disney World, everything you see visually has been touched by thousands of people, from the design phase to the building to the maintenance to the cast members, everything. It's the most impressive business that I've ever seen, far and above, when it comes to the way they scale and the way they build systems to grow companies. So long story short, I left there. They had a job freeze. Again, the economy caught up to me. That's the second time that the economy caught up to me and had me modify my plans. Key lesson, always be flexible because you never know where opportunity will strike. And a few months later, I'd been working on the internet now. After I graduated, I started that stuff up because I wanted to have multiple income streams, which I'm sure a lot of you guys can understand. It's nice to have income coming in from multiple areas, and that's why we want to, build franchises and either own by franchises or build our own franchises and have those income streams coming in off royalties. So long story short, I left Disney because I was like, I'm not going to work for $7 an hour if there's no chance. And they're just now, a few years later, getting to the point where things are back to normal. So I would have been stuck for 5 years for the most part until, I would get something that was more commensurate with a bachelor's degree. So I started the restaurant that fall, actually. I left in May of 2009. Great experience. Loved working there. I had a blast. It just, the math didn't work out, and that's unfortunate because it was a great experience working there and learning just every single day more than you could ever imagine in service and sales and business and whatever. Just a great experience overall. And we started the restaurant, and I remember one of my biggest memories from that was going all in, which is something that I think you have to do when you scale and grow and you really commit to doing that for your business. I remember the day we opened, I had $121 left to my name. I put every dime I had in. I sold a ton of stock that I had saved up in college. I spent the rest of my college savings that I was living off of. And I remember our first day's sales was more than I had in my bank account that day. We made $170 that very first day, with being on the side of a building. I mean, the worst location. I made every mistake real estate-wise you could, even with my background. But, so that's how we got started, and here we are a few years later with many more experiences since then. So that's kind of how I started out in business.
Well, gosh, there's so much to take from all that. First and foremost, Disney's incredible. I mean, I've only experienced it from going there. In fact, my family, we went there back in June, and I can't say June is a particularly good time to go because that's when everybody else goes, and it's super hot. But it was, I mean, God, my daughter just absolutely loved it. Still talks about it to this day, and it's amazing to me how they manage all that so well. The happiest place on earth, and how they have grown and scaled it. And that's a whole 10 shows.
It's unreal.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. But it sounds to me like you always kind of knew you were an entrepreneur, and you always were able to basically put it out there and put it on the line and go after what you wanted. And I think that's a really, really valuable lesson because not everybody has that innately in them. I mean, I think some people realize it later. Some people are forced to realize it because there's just no other job opportunities that they're able to find. But you were lucky enough to realize it early on. And, I'm kind of curious because I really think it'll be interesting for my audience to talk a little bit more in depth about your restaurant experience.
Sure.
As we know, a lot of franchises are restaurants. I mean, there's franchises in almost every sector, but I think when people first think of franchises, they think of restaurants. They think of McDonald's and Subway. And I'm curious because obviously your restaurant was not a franchise, but I'd love for you to sort of walk through the steps that you took really to set that up, to start running it, and sort of, some key things that you learned early on that allowed you to maybe pivot or maybe realize, oh, gee, we really are onto something.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So we started the restaurant in it was January 4th, 2010 was the day we opened. Right after New Year's. First mistake, always budget in your contracts. First mistake we made, we lost in about $5,000 of free rent with our lease because our contractor was delayed. So make sure you have an experienced contract crew on any business that you work, because that's $5,000 that came right out of my pocket and not into sales that we could have gotten momentum. And more important than the money, we lost a lot of momentum in the Christmas holiday season and getting marketing out during that time. So we started in one of the slower times of the year right after New Year's. So first mistake, always make sure your timetables, it's always going to take longer than you expect. So bake in, if you think 6 months, bake in 9, and then plan for 11. So that's what I always tell anybody in business. But so when we set up the restaurant, the thing that we came in with a few things, like my partner who I was dating at the time, we decided to start the restaurant because there was nothing in our area of Orlando here that was like a family owned. We were like a deli, so we sold sliced meat, we sold sandwiches, we did catering, we did like the salads and stuff, and sold things by the pound and sandwiches. That was our business. So we didn't have a lot of hot stuff. We didn't have stoves. We were very small. I mean, 977 square feet. It was the smallest place we could find because we didn't have the budget to build more. Again, making the business, the lesson there is making the business your own, rather than, if you want to build something into a franchise someday or something that could be franchised, you have to touch every detail and build the business the way you want, because the systems you build will reflect that. That's key. That's a key point in anything. Like, you have to dictate the terms of your systems, not the other way around. So when we opened, a lot of the advantages that we had were, one, we kept a reserve of cash flow all the time. Two, with my finance background, I was able to negotiate really good receivables terms, so we had more cash coming in than going out in the beginning, because you have 2 weeks to pay your bills, so you can play the receivables cycle and reinvest the capital and not have to just live off the margin. Which in a franchise situation, that's one of the things you want to watch out in you're covering your agreements, is how much of the money off the top are they going to take. Some of the restaurant franchises take quite a bit, and that's in the restaurant business. If you don't operate tightly, that's your margin. So you got to be really careful about how you do that. That's one thing I would say to anyone looking at the restaurant industry as in the franchise sense of the phrase, instead of starting your own. That's one of the risks that you take. You have to really operate tightly. Which I learned early on, because when you have really good service and you have really good operations, that turns into a lot of money, because in our case, we had utilities, we had salaries, but we didn't have very much. Electric wasn't that much. It was, maybe 1 to 2% of sales, when we finally got up to speed. Very small amounts, because we were a small spot. We didn't have tall ceilings. I made sure to do that so we didn't have a big air conditioning bill. A lot of these details, and that's the point why I'm trying to make here, is not to ramble on about every detail that I paid attention to, but that I looked at the details, and, my partner and her family, we planned out the way we laid out our kitchen so we could just neurotic OCD level detail in there, under the guise that we wanted to turn this into something that we could sell, and we could, build a system. So I looked at my kitchen, I looked at my restaurant layout, I looked at where we put the cash register, I looked at how we handled money, I looked at how we ordered. Everything was designed from the get-go to constantly improve it, like Toyota does with their manufacturing processes. And, in Japanese they call it Kaizen, continuous improvement. And that's the way we did everything. Because, to be honest with you, the funny thing about it is I had no food service experience before I opened that restaurant. My partner, she did. Her whole family had owned a restaurant, and that was one of the things that was the advantage to me. It was like, okay, you have the food stuff down. Having worked at Disney and service industry my entire career at that point, working with people was the only thing I really knew how to do. And like, put a smile on and make sure the last thing they remembered when they left was they got a nice piping hot, delicious sandwich in a bag and a smile on their face for a dollar more than what they would go for the value meal at McDonald's. And that was the idea. The way we priced it, I wanted everything to do that because that was the system. I wanted to systemize service like Disney did. So that
is that what really turned you? I mean, was Disney what first led? Because a lot of first-time entrepreneurs maybe think about systems, but most actually don't. Most just think about the business. I just want to. I'm going to sell the best sandwiches. I'm going to sell the best deli. I mean, they don't think about systemizing it, which, as you and I know, is so important. But was it Disney that taught you that, or did you learn that in other experiences?
It's the way my brain works, but it's also seeing Disney. I mean, like when you see a retail operation that studies, one of the, to give you the level of detail that Disney has, their research department discovered that people would walk an average of 20 steps before they would throw a piece of trash on the ground. So no matter where you are in the Walt Disney World Resort, you're always 20 feet in a guest area. You're always within 20 steps, paces of a trash can. So that's one of the reasons why they're clean. So the reason why their parks are so clean is not just because they have their custodial staff there, cleaning everything up and working, because they do. They have a lot more than other parks and other recreational places in the world, but they start from the get-go. They negotiated with the airport that the airport won't sell chewing gum anywhere on property, so they don't have to pick up gum and people who throw gum on the ground and step it into the pavement. There's like OCD level detail in planning, and that actually makes making the best deli sandwiches or making the best deli meat a lot more easy, because people get into business because they want to run their own show. They don't necessarily want to start a business. They just don't want to work for somebody else. They want to be their own boss. I mean, that's a common theme for people when they start a new venture, whether it's a franchise or whether it's not a franchise. So what
how are you able to not to interrupt, you touched on
okay.
You touched on a really important point I just want to hit on.
Sure.
Is when you have that OCD level detail, which is so important, I completely agree. I think one thing I'd love for you to touch upon is how you create a culture at your business where when you're in the restaurant business, you have employees who may not have that OCD level, and how can you communicate in a way like a Disney does so effectively, obviously, to maybe these lower waged individuals who are working for you, to make sure that they're paying attention to those things, and to do it in a way that you're not just driving them crazy.
Well, it comes down to two things. One, you don't pay the lowest wages ever. Don't be cheap. With labor, the one thing that I notice is you get what you pay for, and that comes around in more money, because if I pay someone a little bit more, they're going to be a better employee and sell more product, and they're going to know how to sell because they're a better communicator. Apple retail stores are a great example. They start $5 higher than most retail jobs in my local area, and they sell more per square foot than any other retail operation in the world. And they start here at $13 in Orlando, Florida, and we're about middle wage territory on average for America, slightly lower actually. So you can imagine what they pay in places like LA or Chicago. Don't be cheap with labor. And the way you get the culture is you build indoctrination stuff. So when you started at Disney and you train, you go through it's called traditions, is what they call it. And traditions is basically cultural orientation, is the easiest way to put it. And then you go through training, which is like more task-based, tactical training. And then you get on the floor and they give you a little sticker, a little red ribbon on your badge, your name tag that says "Earning My Ears." So that's I'm the new guy thing for a while, until you work so many hours. I can't remember what it is exactly, but it's basically the entire step process. So when you interview for them, they're looking for, I can teach anyone to make a sandwich. I learned how to do it, and I didn't even know how to do it the day we opened. I remember the day before we opened, and I was still messing up sandwiches. You can learn any of that stuff, but you can't learn personal interaction skills. You can't learn any of that stuff. And that's how you really have to go about it. Is if you don't believe in what you're doing, nobody else will. So you have to set the example, and you're a coach, so you're constantly investing in your workforce. And a lot of people, and this is, kind of a side note, because a lot of people think, I can't afford to pay people, I can't afford to pay people, I can't afford to pay people, and then they don't make money because they hire cheap people. But the thing is, survey after survey has shown, when you talk to employees, money is like the third or fourth highest priority for most people when it comes to how much money they make. They would rather make a little bit less and work in an awesome environment than make a ton of money and have a boss who's a jerk and not a very nice person. So most people just want to be acknowledged, and I mean, it kind of comes back to very basic people skills that, for me it's very natural. I'll be honest with you. It's easy for me. It doesn't take work to do that. But at the same time, that's how you can grow an operation, is that you empower your employees to sell. Because every smile that they make, every question, have you tried our new German potato salad? We just picked it up and we're trying it out. Would you like a sample of it? Oh, hey, that's great. I'll pick up a pound. Okay, $4. You just increase the average ticket price of that transaction from 10 to 14. Okay, and that means that the profit margin on that transaction doubled. So the sales went up 40%, but the profit doubled because the margin on those salads are like double or triple, whereas a sandwich I make $1 or $2, like a combo and a drink, Okay, so by having someone who's better personal interaction, let's say I pay them $11 an hour, say, instead of the $8, typical food service wage, okay, and they sell one $4 thing an hour, which is so easy. I mean, I could sell a week's worth in lunchtime with the right people. I just paid for them that extra wage that would, attract and keep a higher quality employee. And that's the way you have to think of it. It's thinking like an investor. So instead of being cheap and looking at the bottom line, you got to look at your top line too.
Well, and I think that's why, I mean, I agree completely. I mean, it's a way to differentiate yourself. It's all about customer service. There's so many restaurants out there, and we all know, and when you walk into that restaurant and you get the nice greeting, you get the happy people, the smiles, you get the consistency of all that. That just makes for a great experience, because as we know, I mean, going out to eat is more than just eating the food, right? I mean, It's the experience of going out, and whether or not you have a deli shop or you have the nicest restaurant in town, it still makes a big difference. And it's those little things. I found, I mean, I've had recent experiences, even outside of the restaurant business, where companies that notice things and take the extra time to, send a handwritten note, or, after one of their customers has, had a baby or something like that, send something nice. I mean, those things, that's what drives loyalty.
Yep.
And in this day and age, that's what drives people to go to the internet and start becoming a raving fan. I mean, as a quick example, I use a company called Ruby Receptionist, which all they do is virtual, live, cheerful reception, very professional reception services for businesses, and they're based in Oregon. And I've been raving about them. Not only are they the best at what they do, and they're so consistent in the delivery of their service every single time, and so I love them for that. But my wife just had our second daughter. I don't know how.
Congratulations!
Oh, thank you. I don't know how they knew. They must. I'm sure they follow me on social media or something. But all of a sudden, in the mail, I got a box, and it had a onesie that said "Hello World," and it had Ruby Receptionist logo under it. And then it also had 2 Starbucks gift cards, one for me and one for my wife, and then a handwritten note. And I thought, that's fantastic. Who does that anymore? But it's so fantastic. I mean, it's amazing.
So profitable. And to take that and translate that, because there's a lot of people in business that are numbers based, so it's hard for them to quantify and understand the value of that other than the feel good part. Let's look at that. Like, let's say it's $20 gift cards or $10 gift cards, so there's $20 in value. Let's say a handwritten note, that's free. The onesie, maybe that's $20 or $25. So let's say roughly that they spent $50 plus or minus, including the shipping. But you as a client are worth so much more money, not to mention your audience and the people that you have access to as a professional service provider. I mean, you have access to a lot of businesses, literally. I don't know if it could get any better than what the setup you have. And one fee per month would pay for that forever, and they've got you for life. And that's the I call it it's maybe a bad metaphor, but this is what I call it in business, and this is kind of one of my core principles in sales, really, is I call it the drug dealer mentality. Once they get you hooked because of a good experience, you're never going to leave. And that's smart business. A lot of people, they're like, oh, they get snappy or they take things for granted, but like, your customers are an investment. Like they're an investment like stocks or business or real estate or something like that. You invest in your customers and they will return dividends forever. And you look at all the old family businesses, you look at the way Warren Buffett buys businesses, that's one of the things that he looks for is that repeat customer base. And in the restaurant industry, for example, that's the only way you make money. Like you lose money your first transaction or two, no matter how big the sale is. I'm just telling you the truth. I mean, the margin's not high enough to cover the cost of acquisition for that customer. So if they don't come back in and tip and do all that stuff because they had a great experience, you will die, and you'll die fast in that industry because you won't have the cash reserves, you won't have the business there that will sustain you, because you have to look at it from the math side of it is after a certain time when you've paid all your bills and your fixed costs, the only marginal cost you have is the cost of the food and maybe labor, but most of the time not in a small operation like a deli or a small, Quiznos or Subway or something of that smaller size. Okay, so if you don't get the repeat business, that's where all your profit lies, on that long tail customer that, I like to give you an example. When we first started being successful, we were at about $15,000 a month in revenue, and this was our first year, so it was pretty good, and it provided us a good living and paid all our employees. But when we went from 15 to 17, and then 17 to 19, and then added catering business on top of that, all of a sudden, I paid off student loans. I paid down my car note that I had at the time. We got a new apartment that was pretty nice. That was down here with the real estate. It was actually going to be a condo, so it was like kind of a semi-luxurious condo that they converted into an apartment. And like we upgraded our lifestyle by orders of magnitude off of very small increases in sales. And that's something too that like a systems brain will understand, is that when you grow and you want to scale, your sales might go up 10%, but your profits might go up 40%.
Yeah, it's that compounding effect, and it's the idea of doing it, creating the foundation with the system that you can then plug people into. Mm-hmm. And have them operate and revamp and work, and it was just kind of interesting because I had the great fortune not too long ago to interview Michael Gerber, who wrote The Incredible E-Myth Revisited and is awesome. Sort of a legend in the entrepreneur space, and he talks about obviously the power of the system and how Ray Kroc with McDonald's. Essentially, he realized that his ultimate customer was the franchisees rather than, he wasn't thinking in terms of the person coming in to buy the hamburger. Obviously, that's important. That goes without saying. But he was saying if he can create a system where it can be replicated 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, whatever times over, that's where the real value was. You create that system and then you get people to help run the system and help make the system more efficient. And it's just, when done right, it just creates a situation like you were talking about where then the compounding effect, once you reach a certain level, is really incredible.
It really is. And that's the thing, like when when we started going, and this is kind of like, kind of touching on what you asked earlier, I really came into the business with the idea that like my goal was within 5 years I wanted to have 10 restaurants. And the idea was that if I had 10 restaurants and like I was going to do the managing partner model, which is pretty common in the restaurant industry, where you have a managing partner who's your GM type figure, but they get a 10% of profits. So they have an incentive to run the place very well, very efficiently, and basically they're incentivized like an owner instead of an employee. And that was what I wanted, because I wanted to have those assets out there making money, because I knew our food was good. I knew I had better quality ingredients, and it was all natural bread, all natural deli meat. It was better than anything you could get at the grocery store or at the other chains, restaurants and stuff like that. So I knew I was covered there. I knew I could systemize the service and know how to hire people that were like me, that were people. I mean, locally here, two places that come to mind that are really good outside of Disney is Starbucks, and the local grocery chain here is called Publix, and it's employee owned, so everybody has an incentive to be really on point with customers, because they own stock. They get a little bit of stock every paycheck. So long story short, I could systemize that. I could systemize the customer service environment. So I was like, wait a second here. Now it's just finding those people, getting the operations down here, and then making manuals and training people at our original store and optimizing the flow here. How much parking space do we need? What's the ideal amount of chairs in here for lunchtime? I mean, all that kind of stupid level detail that I would need to build the franchise model as if I was owning all my own franchises, and then teach other people to do it. And that was the aha moment for me, because I was like, I don't want to make sandwiches forever. I'm doing this to build a bigger goal, right? And that was the mentality that I went into it, because I was an entrepreneur who wanted to be like a Ray Kroc, and he started and picked up, like, I think 4 McDonald's restaurants and then turned it into what it is today. And that was kind of what I saw myself, after I read his story. So,
well, it's so true, because I tell people all the time, no matter if you say to yourself as a business owner, I would never franchise. A lot of people say, I'd never franchise. Well, that's fine. Then just implement franchise-like systems for your non-franchise business, because at the end of the day, the real reason a lot of franchises fail, obviously it's because maybe they don't have the system that you think they have when you buy them, but a lot of it comes down to the finances as well, as you kind of touched upon earlier. I mean, there's a lot of restaurant franchises where it's not only the royalty or the percent of the royalty, but it's how often that's collected. I mean, there's a lot of franchises out there that you have to pay your royalty each and every week. And by the way, your credit card sales are factored into that royalty, but your credit card takes 3 days to show up in your bank account. So what's that going to do for your cash flow? So a lot of times people, depending on the system, you have to be really, really careful and pay attention in the agreements to obviously what those say and how that's going to affect your bottom line. But the point is that businesses don't fail for having great systems. There may be economic model problems, there may be target market problems, but having great systems and processes that are repeatable, that are efficient, that are practical, that work well within the course of your business will only make you more profitable. And that applies to any franchise business or any non-franchise business. And I think it ties in perfectly to what you're doing now with the Brilliance Network. And I mentioned it at the outset of the show, but I'm kind of fascinated by the Brilliance Network, because I believe its sort of mission, or what it does, is to help businesses scale and grow. And obviously we've been talking about that, and I do a lot of that in my own work. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the Brilliance Network and sort of what businesses you guys are working with, or you like to work with, and how you help them scale and grow.
Sure. So a lot of what we do is come down to two things. It's repeat customers and new customer lead acquisition. So right now, I personally have had the most success working with businesses that are a few years in. They have cash flow. They're not, like a lot of people in our industry, in the consulting business, love startups because they get a big chunk of money from an investor and then they blow all their money. I actually don't like working with those. I like working with bootstrap type businesses, because bootstrapped entrepreneurs are willing to do what I tell them to do, because it's like, why are you paying me if you don't want to do what I'm going to suggest you do? Like, I pre-qualify a lot in that regard, because that's the soft stuff that you can't measure with an income statement. You have to look at the entrepreneur and saying, is the problem the fact they don't know how to grow, or is it they don't want to grow? And by grow, I don't mean like financially. I mean as a person, as a business owner, as a leader. Do they want to grow as that, or do they want to stay the same? Because a lot of businesses, and you can look at The Profit is a great show to see this on TV. Shark Tank is another great one to see on TV. TV, you can see a lot of people aren't prepared and aren't really thinking like an investor and really putting it out there for the other people. They're kind of like their own person and they think like themselves. So for me, I like to work with businesses that are doing, moderately well and want to go up, because as I don't remember who it was now, but recently I saw someone say, or heard them say, I can't remember, they said it's a lot easier to multiply small numbers than it is to multiply zeros. And that's like the kind of the consulting model, because I've taken on clients that I really enjoyed working with, but from a financial standpoint and the time it took to get them to the result and the desired outcome that they wanted was more than what they could afford to pay me. So like that compresses my margins. So that's, to be honest with you, I mean, I eat my own cooking, so I look at all my own mistakes in the past and grow from those mistakes to grow our consulting practice. But I like to work with business owners. We work with a lot of online entrepreneurs, so people who have sales funnels where they have a sales system in place, and then we go in and like kind of cut and dice and improve things and add one little piece, because it's marginally very profitable with the stuff that we do, because they're already profitable. So I'm just basically dropping sales to the bottom line for the most part, especially in the digital space, because it's digital, so there's not really much cost of goods sold. And so that's what we do. We generate leads for customers. We help them sell more to the people they already have. That's a personal favorite of mine, because I just love finding that money, because it's not really about the money. It's about the fact that, the businesses we work with are very mission-based. So they're there to solve a problem. They want to be the best. They want to grow to be the best, whether it's a service provider or whether they sell an information product. They want to be one of the best, if not the best, in their market and whatever they teach in their philosophies. So if we help them sell more stuff, for example, by adding things into their sales processes and things of that nature, we're helping them solve more problems for those customers they already have. And that to me is like where I'm really passionate about, whether it's local businesses or online businesses. When you think like that, the stuff that I like to share and talk about is just, it opens their mind, and you can just see it on their face, or even if you're on the phone and you're doing it over the phone instead of in person, you can just hear the aha moment go off in their brain, and it's like a firework, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I never thought of that. And you just hear it in their voice, because it changes, and then you're like, yeah, I like to, pump my fist, and I'm like, yeah, this is freaking awesome, So, but that's just me, because that's the way I'm wired. I like to see people grow and be successful, and that's sort of that's what makes me happy, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of business consultants. There's a lot of ways to make money. There's a lot of ways to sell stuff, and I just enjoy really, for me, it's more about seeing people grow and see something that I had a very tiny part of grow into something much better. And I tell this to people that we teach, because we also teach other people to work with local businesses to obviously expand our reach. And one of the things I tell them, I'm like, it's your responsibility to help these local businesses and to get good at your craft and to be the best at your craft, because we are the economic stimulus. That's been a big topic the last few years, and we are that people. We are the difference between hiring employees and putting their kids through school and all that stuff. We are that person. If we're not there and we don't do our jobs properly, they lose their business, or they grow their business, one or the other, because usually when they come to us, they're at an inflection point one way or the other. And that's something that I keep in my mind as a motivator and a mission, kind of a mission. If you want to think of it like a military type of frame of mind, I think of it like that. And that's just the way I'm hardwired as a person, to just help people and to really make a difference. And we do well in the process, because, we don't fail that much anymore.
Do you approach, traditional brick and mortar businesses differently than you do online businesses in terms of your approach?
It's weird, because it depends on how we're doing our customer acquisition. A lot of times people will reach out because they buy our digital products, but they want to do an offline business, like a local, like brick and mortar business. And so it's different. Like, I don't approach them differently. I take a little bit more preparation time with brick and mortar businesses, because they have physical costs like storefronts and employees and utilities and cost of goods sold. So they don't have as much margin to play with. So I have to sit and think and plan a little bit more than I do for digital stuff, because most of what we do, like on the digital side, is either working with marketers who do like lead generation, phone call generation, that sort of thing for attorneys, dentists, those type of businesses. But if you make a mistake online, it stinks, and then you move on. Like, there's not a lot of costs other than maybe if you spent money on advertising, because it's marginal. Like, we're marginal business. Like, that's why we like to work with businesses that are already established. Whereas if I make a mistake in a brick and mortar business, that might actually cost some money because they utilize their resources, their employees, their advertising budgets, and that sort of thing. So I don't approach them differently. I approach them because business is business. I mean, it's, people with a problem, you're in the middle as the solution provider and then exchanging money. I mean, that's business, every business. So for me, it's just a matter of understanding the dynamic of the business before we do any actual work, because I'm very concerned, because a lot of business owners, as I'm sure you know as well, this is not just a business to them, it's part of their identity. So if they're giving me that, they're in a sense giving me a piece of their identity as the entrepreneur and the owner. Like, it's they identify themselves as the owner of this business, just like they identify themselves as a husband or a wife or someone's child or someone's friend. Like, it's part of their psyche. So you have to be very careful. And with local stuff, they don't usually make as high profit margins as the online stuff. So you just got to be a little more careful. So I hope that answers that question. But that's the way I personally do it, and I don't take on a lot of clients if I don't think I can actually help them too. That's another big thing that we do preparation-wise.
No, I mean, I think that's a good point, and I really relate to your point on wanting to work with businesses that have been around a little bit. I mean, as an example, in my world, I can help a business get started, right? I mean, I've got startup packages where I can basically help them set up, help them put some contracts together, do a couple of basic stuff. And then it's sort of like, okay, come back and see me after a year or something like that. I mean, let's get this business going, right? Because from an experience perspective, it's hard to really help somebody if they haven't kind of gone through it a little bit themselves. And then to your point on, wanting people to really listen to you and not drive the train themselves. I mean, it so resonates with me because, you get people, and it was a couple years ago where I stopped letting people do this to me, where, people come to you and they say, okay, here's exactly what my legal issue is. Here's what I need you to do, X, Y, and Z. And now it's sort of like, well, wait, we're going to take a look at it. I'm going to figure this out, and we're going to do this sort of the way that I believe we're going to do it, because that's why you're coming to me as your trusted advisor. And if you don't have the trust to have somebody else help you, then you need to go see somebody else, right? I mean,
hit the road. Yeah, I don't got any time for that. I have no. You go through, for me, it was one experience where that was the case, and I'm done with that stuff forever. Like, that will never happen to me again. Take a hike, buddy. That's my attitude. Like, if they come in with a wrong, and there's difference to me, and like for me personally with that, I don't like when people try to dictate terms to me, because, like you said, they're coming to you as a trusted advisor. So if you don't want to come to me, that's why my pre-qualification stuff is I'm always improving that. But for me, a lot of people are used to that because they're type A's. So I can check a type A real fast, and if they don't check themselves, then I'm just like, well, then we can't work together. Then there's someone else that you should probably work with, and have a great day. Because, like I said, you can't do that.
Well, and that crosses the board with everything. You really got to do that. I mean, I've had people come to me and say, hey, I want you to review my franchise documents, but I only want you to look at these 10 things. Now, you got to understand, with franchise documents, as I'm sure you do, Brad, these are hundreds of pages of documents, right? And
sure.
It's like no. That's not what's going to happen. I mean,
and that's not the way the law works. And that's not the way the law works. I mean, the law is complex, and it's that's the problem with people with the law. And I'm not a huge expert on the law by any stretch of the imagination, but one thing is associated with another, and is associated with another, and then you get into state by state issues. And if you get cross border crap, then you got to deal with, one state does it this way and another one does it that way, and it's like, why would I? It's like asking a doctor. You say, I got a stomach ache, but I only want you to look at my stomach. Like it makes no sense. It's very illogical, but I mean, that's the way people see stuff. Like when it comes to advisory services, they see it as, I have a problem with my phone. It's like, no, you don't really have a problem with your phone. You have a problem with these other three things that manifest in the form of a phone sales that's not working out the way you want.
I love that. I love that example. I've used that before. I mean, it truly is. It's like going to the doctor and saying to the doctor, this is what's wrong with me. It's like, no, you're going to the doctor so that they can tell you. Now, we don't want to leave the wrong impression. Obviously, we both work with people, but it's the idea that, I think people approach things from the wrong perspective. I think, in my case, on the legal side, people obviously, want to limit their costs, but they also want to get good representation, and every situation is a little bit different. And it's just kind of funny because, I'll get people who will come with legal documents that maybe they've gotten online. And I'm different from a lot of attorneys in that that's okay with me, because sometimes the stuff you get online, I will only have to tweak a little. It just depends on the situation. Others, we got to start from scratch all over again. And so it just all depends, but it all really comes down to, no matter if it's, professional services or any kind of business, it's all about being able to have that trust with whoever you're working with, and understand, on our end of things, that's really, really important, or else it's not going to be a good relationship. I mean, it's really, that's how the relationship needs to start.
Yeah, no, I agree, and you got to start, and that's why, like when I do my interviews, and I do this in my pre-qualification stage, and for anyone listening to this that ever does, another popular franchises are those the tax liberty, and I think the HR block is another one that I've heard of. I mean, all those types of operations for financial services. I would do this as well, and I pre-qualify the client. So like what that means is, I've said that a few times, I'll ask them straight out, how much money are you making right now? What are your profits? What are your costs? How much does it cost to do that? What's your average sale? And like, I've asked them a lot of personal details, and this is off the initial consultation. Obviously, it's not recorded for obvious reasons, but if they're not willing to tell me that, and they filled out an application, like, done. Like, you came to me, man. And that's the thing, like, because I touch I touch a lot of different stuff, and I mean, like with our clients, I know a lot. I mean, just like you, as a lawyer, as intimate of a detail as maybe their accountant or tax person and their spouse. I mean, like, there's probably a few people that know more about their business than themselves, except for you and a few others. And I like to put myself in that position, because that to me is where I can help the most, if I know that. Because, one small tweak, and that's the thing with scaling and growing that's really important, because that's what we're talking about today, is one small tweak can be orders of magnitude down the line, especially if it's early in a process. And that's the way that, I sat next to as a kid, and you asked me earlier, have I always thought this way? This is one of those stories that I like to tell, is I sat next to a gentleman who worked in the automotive industry, and, we're both from Indiana. So, there's a lot of them, and I sat next to him on the airplane leaving Indianapolis one day growing up, and I think I was maybe a teenager or something, and we got to talk, and I asked him what he did, and he said he worked for, I think it was General Motors or Ford. And long story short, he was an engineer in the engines. He worked at a stamping plant down there in Indianapolis somewhere. And so he was explaining the process of how engineers tweak engines, and they have for 100 years. They do small improvements, and it cascades throughout the rest of the thing. So 100 units of energy, 2 of them come out and power the vehicle, the rest of it's heat. So like, that's what they're constantly trying to improve on over the years, with switching from steel to aluminum to plastics to whatever else they build, to cutting parts out. That's all they do, and that's the way I look at systems engineering. UPS did the same thing when I did that in college, like I mentioned earlier. They're always tweaking the smallest stuff. What piece of technology can they put in this part of the process to speed up customs, to speed up the way they load the planes? They have these little weird compartments that they look like a triangle, but where the C side of a AB triangle, it's rounded, so it fits into the plane, the tubular body of a freighter jet, and they slide it in. So that's how they pack more stuff in each one of those specialized containers, and they're loaded by hand based on what's in them and what they need to do, and it speeds up the process. But they've been working on this for decades. And that's the thing, like when I go into a business, I fix a lot of the little things, like we call it the quick boom, and then I go for the longer term stuff, the cultural, the ideological, the financial, the savings, how much reserves do they have, how many days of sales do they have in place. All those types of things get fixed later, but I want them to see, hey, look, you're bleeding here. Imagine a leaky boat. Put my finger there, plug that leak, plug this leak, plug this leak. Then I can say, let's shovel the water out of this boat, get this thing patched up, and then we'll go back to smooth sailing, and then we'll put better sails on, and then sail faster through the ocean to wherever we want to go. And that's just the framework. That's systems in general. Plug the problems and then fix the symptoms, and that's the other way around people do it. They usually go after symptoms because that's all they see. They can't see that maybe there's something deeper that's causing the real problem. So,
well, no, that's great stuff. I mean, it's clear you have a lot of value to add to these businesses that you help, and it's really been a blast talking with you. I feel like we could talk for a long time, but before we go, take a minute and just tell people how they can get a hold of you. How they can reach you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So best way to reach out to me is Facebook. I'm on Facebook. My handle is PLR Doctor on there, so it's facebook.com/PLR Doctor. And you can reach out. Just add me as a friend and send me a message and say you heard about me on the show, and we'll get in touch. And if we can work together, great. If not, that's cool too. I'm just happy to chat. I keep things pretty low key with that, and thank you for having me on. I've had a great time talking with you today.
Yeah, Brad, I look forward, but we'll have to do it again sometime. I look forward to staying in touch.
For sure, man, for sure.
Thanks.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.